I'm just going to get set up here. Minimize the chat. All right. Welcome. Hi, I'm Miguel Ruiz, he, him pronouns, the supervising librarian of the Robert Crown Branch Library of the Evanston Public Library. In partnership with the City of Evanston Office of Sustainability, we welcome you to our program tonight, titled Environmental Racism in Community Gardens, part of our Climate Resilient Communities series. Before we begin, we do have some housekeeping items to cover. As a reminder, tonight's presentation will be recorded and uploaded to the Evanston Public Library YouTube channel. Additionally, we remind attendees that tonight will be a space for BIPOC, meaning Black, Indigenous, and people of color voices. And while we appreciate everyone joining us, this is a place for BIPOC to freely discuss without judgment or input from people outside of their community. Inspired by the American Library Association Resilient Communities, Libraries Respond to Climate Change grant that was awarded to the Evanston Public Library in the last quarter of 2020, this series of presentations, film discussions, community conversations, and hands-on learning kits will focus on climate change, its causes and effects. It will also zoom in on its intersection with race, gender, and other identities while making an effort to bring participants closer to the realities of climate change in other communities, near and far, as well as to make these issues more accessible to our local communities in Evanston in culturally relevant ways. By providing participants with a better understanding of the science behind climate change, the social, ecological, and political consequences of its impacts, and with effective and simple tools, and inspiration to work towards solutions, the series' ultimate goal is to inspire participants into climate action in whatever spheres of life they're most interested in. We hope tonight's event and this series moves you from climate indifference or climate despair into a healthy, sustainable, and long-lived commitment to climate action. And speaking of our series, please consider joining us for our next presentation on Thursday, February 25th. In this series, where Dr. Udo, Associate Professor of Public Health at Northeastern Illinois University and Adjunct Professor at DePaul University's Environmental Science Department and Master of Public Health program, will present Africa, Bearing the Burden of Climate Change. Dr. Udo will share his story growing up in Nigeria in the 1970s, providing attendees with context to understand the great issue at hand, climate change and its effect on Africa's economy, its land, and its people. Attendees will learn about the socioeconomic impacts of a history of abusive practices, including damage from oil spills, the inability to grow crops, water pollution, and decreased livelihoods of entire communities, and how parallel issues are playing out in the Chicagoland area, giving examples of actions and policies that can be applied to both mitigate and reduce climate change in both settings. We hope you can join us. Now I'll pass it on to our moderator for tonight, Asia Gilbert.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm very excited. I'm very glad that I have this opportunity to present with you one of my biggest passions, community gardens and environmental racism and how they intersect quite greatly. So as stated before, my name is Asia Gilbert. I also want to thank the library for giving us this space, and then also Kumar, who is doing tech for tonight. So if you have any questions about tech, go ahead and message him privately or message in the chat that you're having problems and he can help you. And then I'm also very thankful. We have 3 wonderful panelists tonight that are going to help, really broaden this discussion. And I just cannot wait. And then before I start, I do have a request. I stated it earlier, but if everyone could just put their pronouns in their name. If you're unsure how to edit your name, you can just scroll over your face and there's 3 little dots on the right-hand corner. Click it, and then at the very bottom, it says rename, and then you can put your pronouns in right next to your name. Thank you, it will be greatly appreciated. And so I would like to start off with introductions. As I stated before and multiple times, my name is Asia. I'm a Greenest Region Corps member working in the Office of Sustainability. I got my bachelor's in biology I got my bachelor's in biology with a minor in ethnic studies, where I actually did my thesis on alternative food movements within Black communities as a direct response to environmental racism. So this is something that I have studied and am very passionate about. Our first panelist of the night is Dominique Edwards, who is a Black urban planner from Northwest Indiana with a lot under her belt. She is the vice chair of the Michigan City Sustainability Commission, the Northern Region representative of the American Planning Association Indiana chapter, and is a board member and founding member of the NWI Food Council. She also has her master's from DePaul, and she's just absolutely wonderful. Dominique, would you please unmute yourself and say hello to everyone?
Hi, everyone. How are you? Thank you so much. I'm so blessed to be here, and I greatly thank the city of Evanston for welcoming me to discuss these very intense topics this evening in a space that's specifically designed for BIPOC folks, which I sometimes don't get to do as often as I like.
Thank you. And then our next two panelists are Maya Robinson and Neil Williams. They are actually Evanston natives, which is absolutely wonderful because that means that we get someone who's going to be able to talk about their experiences right there in Evanston. And they are also core members of the organization Evanston Fight for Black Lives. They're both at university right now. Maya is getting her bachelor's in sociology from Barnard College, Columbia University, while Nia is getting their bachelor's in biological engineering at North Carolina A&T State University. Maya, Nia, please unmute yourself and say hello.
Hello. How's everybody doing? Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get to talk with y'all.
Hi, I'm Maya again. I use she, her pronouns. I'm really happy to be here and excited to represent Evanston Fight for Black Lives.
Thank you both so much for coming. I'm very excited to get to talk to you. All right, so now the introductions are over, we can stop sharing the screen, and I'm just going to go into a little bit about my experience with community gardens and a little bit of my thesis. So, sorry, my face just got really big. So the goal of this webinar is to connect with Black and Brown Chicago residents in order to have a thoughtful conversation on the connection between environmental racism and community gardens. I want to first start this conversation with a few definitions so we're all have the same understanding. First of all, environmental racism is the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on communities of color. And with climate change, we are seeing that communities of color are the first to be impacted, and they are hit the hardest with things like flooding and drought and hurricanes and just everything that you see right now in our world. It is hitting communities of color first and the hardest, and they have the least amount of resources in order to help pick themselves back up. And I think that's really important to think about while we're having this conversation. So an example of environmental racism is something like lower air quality due to the fact that a lot of communities of color are placed in industrial zones, like factories. And we would very rarely see something like a factory right next to a very large, grandiose house in a predominantly white neighborhood. The same goes for landfills and highways. These are all placed near communities of color, and these communities of color are often just tucked away into these considered undesirable parts of neighborhoods. And people of color, specifically Black people, have to suffer the effects of this. And so when I talk about environmental racism, I want everyone to remember that it is systemic, meaning that it is embedded in our society, widely accepted and even encouraged in many ways by our government and our society. And so when we are trying to reverse things like this, we have to understand that it is not just an individual, it is an entire society that has to work to reverse environmental racism. And so we're here to talk about gardening. And so I want to obviously talk about gardening. So one of the impacts of environmental racism is actually living in food deserts, which is where a community has little to literally zero access to fresh produce due to the fact that many grocery stores do not set up shop in communities of color for many reasons. And so a lot of the time, people of color are left to fend for themselves and rely on things like convenience stores or bodegas in order to get a lot of the time snack foods or prepackaged foods like macaroni and cheese and ramen, and things that like we aren't necessarily getting access to fresh produce and fresh healthy food. A lot of the times there's liquor stores where there could be a grocery store. And so that's something that has widely impacted many communities of color, and the people within it. And so a community garden is kind of thought as a remedy to this. It is actually a direct action against this environmental racism. And so for many people, they might say, well, if community gardens are the remedies for this environmental racism that people are facing, then why don't we see more community gardens spread throughout neighborhoods of color? And there are many reasons for that: financial and time, space, all of these things. But one thing that I really would like to talk about, and something that I think a lot of people don't actually think of, is the fact that manual labor, farming, working land is actually has a deep root to slavery. A lot of the time when I was working in my community garden, there would be a lot of little Black children, and they would, say, "You're working me like a slave out here, Grandpa." And though it was funny at the time, it's something to chuckle at. You also have to think about the fact that like there is this deep ingrained negative connotation to gardening that we don't even realize we have. We think of working the land as something that only a slave would do. And so a lot of the times children never actually get this opportunity to see the beauty that comes with gardening. And on top of this negative connotation to slavery and gardening, we also have to think about the fact that the land that we sit on right now is not our land. A lot of African Americans are actually not here by choice, unlike many other communities of color and white people. We did not immigrate here. We were forced to be here. And so there's this lost connection to a heritage and a land in Africa, while also living on a land that is not ours. And so I think before I move on to our first panelist, I want us all to think about the fact that where does that leave African Americans if we are forced to forever work a land that is not ours, and we do not belong on this land. It's not ours to be on, yet we aren't here by choice, yet we don't have any idea where we come from. Where does that leave African Americans when it comes to our own sovereignty and gardening? So thank you all for listening very briefly about something I'm very passionate about. I could talk about this for hours, but we only have an hour, and I want to move on to our panelists. So first up, I would like to welcome Dominique Edwards to the spotlight with me. Hi, Dominique.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great, thank you.
So do you mind just telling me a little bit about what you do and how you got to your position?
Sure, of course. So basically, I am a public servant. Like you said, I'm actually a 2016 DePaul graduate of the Sustainable Urban Development program. I started off doing this work alongside my father in 2009. And that year, my father taught me how to make a garden, grow my own food. And little did I know then how empowering being connected to the earth was, and also how healing being connected to the earth was. And we continued to grow our own food for about 5 years after that.
That's absolutely amazing. Did you ever say you were being worked like a slave?
I didn't. Actually, shockingly enough.
That's good. So So I know that you have a lot of knowledge around food sovereignty, and I talked a lot about the impact of slavery. And obviously, a lot of people can easily say that slavery was, over 150 years ago. So why is it still impacting Black people today, which we could easily debunk? But what about the more recent history having an impact on Black communities and food sovereignty?
Well, what's very interesting about that, it's first and foremost, it's incredibly important that we, as Black folks, obtain access to land. But we constantly need to remember that we are merely land stewards. For Black folks, access to land means freedom and liberation. Unfortunately, we do not own land, and although our ancestors lost land significantly due to systemic oppression, especially from federal agencies like the USDA, we have to first and foremost remember that this is Indigenous land first and always. Black farmers have only had 1% of access to land since 1910. And so, as you mentioned, slavery, after slavery, we were made an incredibly false promise, which was being provided 40 acres and a mule, right? So a lot of us, we've probably heard that a lot throughout our lives, that we're gonna get this 40 acres and a mule. When are we gonna 40 acres and a mule? Unfortunately, we never received our 40 acres. And it was actually slave owners who received reparations due to their losses of a labor force. And so here we are, we're displaced with no resources, but we have centuries of a skill set, and that's farming and agricultural work, which has been incredibly whitewashed. My network in particular, I consistently see something that is an indigenous method of farming or growing, and it has been rebranded to fit a white narrative. And it's insulting and disrespectful. So our ancestors brought these skills with them from Africa. Our ancestors braided seeds into their hair, and that's how we have some of the staple foods in our diets and Black culture today. So many of us have a long legacy of working the land, and there are many of us coming back to the land. And what Mother Erica Allen from Growing Power and Sit Back would tell you is our ancestral calling. So if you feel like you have like a natural pull to the earth or to nature, that's because we have an ancestral calling. So if your ancestors are trying to talk to you, well, you better listen, because I didn't have my head knocked between the drum and wall a couple times doing this work. So it's been a minute. So the importance of Black-led food movements is that it ties us to our ancestors. It ties us back to the land, and especially land that we were displaced from and forced from, and it empowers us to seek freedom and liberation.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. One last question. Do you mind just talking to me a little bit briefly about some common misconceptions that you've heard around food sovereignty and what you say to people that may have these misconceptions?
So doing food systems work, we often get tied up in the language. So earlier you talked about food deserts, but those of us that do this work, we are utilizing the term food apartheid. When it comes to systematically excluded communities, we often find ourselves using the term food desert as if these areas, they lack access to fresh food, and that's like a naturally occurring phenomenon that's happening in nature. Unfortunately, that's not the case. When we talk about lack access to food, we oftentimes only focus on what's superficial, what we can see, and what we as planning practitioners call the built environment. Of course, we can see that our communities don't have grocery stores, right? We also see our communities saturated with, like you said earlier, fast food chains, liquor stores, Dollar Generals or Family Dollars on nearly every block or less than a mile away from each other. And this is also by design. So there has to be someone on the municipal level, right, that is allowing for these things to be permitted or allowing them to be built. We see more Dollar Generals per mile than we see actual grocery stores. So we have a very industrialized and corporate privatized food system. And what do you usually find when you go into a dollar store, right? We see junk food, like you mentioned earlier, snacks, canned vegetables and meat than never anything fresh. So under food apartheid, we are able to encompass everything in our society that impacts us socially, politically, economically, environmentally. And so we are segregated, and we're under a form of segregation from our most basic need that we consume every day, and that's food. So healthy, fresh, and culturally appropriate food at that. A primary argument that I often deal with is that just because we implement community gardens, urban farms, or grocery stores in our communities, that won't make folks eat better. And that's true, but at least they have options. There's direct, instead of just continuing to fill our communities with the types of food that has made us sick. There's direct correlation between lack of access to healthy food and nutritional-based illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension, obesity, which is why the community garden that I manage exists. Our local hospital system saw that, my neighborhood is called Eastport. The local hospital saw that Eastport residents were getting sick, that there was an influx of our people coming to see doctors that had issues with their diabetes or heart disease and whatnot. So they implemented a community garden in the neighborhood. So giving our people actual options to eat better and educating them about their options to eat better makes a world of difference.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I could talk to you all night about this.
Oh.
I'm so excited to have you here. I do want to welcome the next few panelists. Hopefully we can talk about this a little bit more, and also you can, talk to people a little bit more in the breakout rooms. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, Mia and Maya, welcome them to the spotlight. Amazing. Thank you both for being here. So you are both a part of Evanston Fight for Black Lives. Do you mind explaining a little bit how you got into the organization and what are some of the goals for the organization?
Yeah, I can take that one. So Evanston Fight for Black Lives started at the end of May of last year, after the death of George Floyd. It was pretty much kind of just like a group of friends. Almost all of us were a part of a group called SOAR, which stands for Students Organized Against Racism at ETHS. So we had like connections from that, and we had experience organizing through that. And from then, in like 2 days, I think, we planned a protest on the last day of May. And supposedly it was like the biggest protest in Evanston history. Like, I think about like 5,000 people came, which is super awesome. And since then, we've held a lot of events, like in person and online, with our main goal of defunding the police department and bringing liberation to Black Evanstonians.
That is absolutely amazing. I am obsessed. So do you mind telling me how community gardens and how you two fall into this talk?
Yeah, I can take that one. So basically, both me and Maya kind of started gardening this summer. So then blah, blah, so we like that. Then Maya hits me up like talking about this garden that was happening on the south side of Chicago, and how we should do it in Evanston because we didn't see that happening here. And we both thought that it was very important that we bring a community garden specifically to the Fifth Ward, because we understand that like a connection to nature and the environment is definitely a means of like liberation for Black folks, especially when, like how Dominique was saying, like the history of how like environmental things have been stripped away from us. So we wanted it to like provide a space, hopefully, in the spring and summer for Black people to work, maybe get paid. Definitely want to like just provide a safe space for Black people in a world that is inherently unsafe for Black people. Yeah.
Awesome. Just in case there's any non-Evanston residents, do you mind just explaining the makeup of the Fifth Ward and what that means to you?
Yeah, so the Fifth Ward is like a very historically Black neighborhood in Evanston. It's located over by, okay, I was gonna say like landmarks, but if you're not from Evanston, then you don't actually know that. But it's on the west side of Evanston. And due to redlining, that's where a lot of Black people stay. And yes, I think that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much. Do you have anything else to say? Any other topics that you'd like to bring up here quickly?
I think just briefly, Nia pretty much like covered the whole thing, but we want to kind of like what Dominique was referring to earlier, like instead of it just being a garden and like on a plot of land and like you pass by and you don't really know what's going on, we really want it to be interactive and actually engaging with the community, and that can take shape in like, it doesn't have to be people actually like signing up to volunteer and like digging holes, like it can literally just be like any form of safe space for Black people, like to just walk in and be around each other, and a whole new aspect with like the environment that a lot of us didn't get when we were growing up to now. So
Thank you both so much for coming to talk. Everyone, we will have breakout rooms very shortly, so you can hopefully have more opportunity to learn about this potential community garden that they've just started working on. So Kumar, if you could share the screen again, we can get the slides up on breakout rooms. Thank you so much. Okay, so we will be putting 5 discussion questions in the chat box. There will be breakout rooms that will last until 7:25. We want to make sure that everyone can actually get out of here by 7:30. There will also be a 2-minute countdown on the top. That doesn't mean that you should leave. It just means that the breakout room will end in 2 minutes. So, you know, finish up whatever conversation you're having, and it will shoot you back to the main room once it's over. We do ask that participants evenly distribute themselves among the breakout rooms. Breakout rooms will be labeled by name. So Asia, Dominique, and then Nia and Maya will be in a breakout room together. So if you see that there's like 40 people in one breakout room, just hop on out, click on another person. The questions are all the same. The discussions will be invigorating for everyone. And then I just want to remind everyone that this is a discussion space for BIPOC people. I want people to be able to feel like they can be vulnerable, talk about their experience, without feeling judged. So if you are here as a non-BIPOC, just take this as a chance to actively listen to your BIPOC counterparts. And then next slide. So these are the discussion questions. Let me make sure that they're in the chat before we all go over to the breakout rooms. Okay. 1 second. There we go. So those are the questions. Once breakout rooms are open, you should be able to still see them in the chat. If not, the moderators and panelists should have them, so we can also share them in the chat again. So yeah, Dominique, Maya, Nia, you can go ahead and head into your own individual labeled breakout rooms, and everyone jump into breakout rooms and have a wonderful, thoughtful discussion. Thank you all so much.
So for those that are still thinking about which breakout room you're interested in, you should see option at the bottom of your screen to click on. There should be a little box that says breakout rooms. You should be able to click on that and choose any of the 3 rooms that have popped up. If you're having trouble, either unmute yourself or drop a message in the chat, and I can go ahead and assign you a breakout room. Yeah, Marty, or would you like to be assigned you're muted. Would you like to be assigned a breakout room? You could just nod yes if that's okay.
I'm happy to go to any one of the rooms. I've been community gardening since I was 4, and you can see I'm not a kid anymore. So,
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and assign you to a room. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mar?
Excellent. Yes.
I'd like to be in breakout room 1, but I'm not certain how to get there. So I have the breakout room list.
Okay, so when you say breakout room 1, you mean
The first question.
Well, so the breakout rooms are not actually by question. All the breakout rooms are going to go over the same questions. The breakout rooms are just based on which panelists you'd like to be in conversation with, including Asia, the moderator.
Okay, so you have to pick one.
Correct.
How do you pick one?
Well, if you tell me which one you want to be in, I can go ahead and.
I'm
send
okay.
you-
I don't really have it. You can choose. You can put me in a group.
Okay, Roberta, I'm going to go ahead and put you in Nia and Maya's group. Here
Okay.
you go.
And you can go ahead and put me in a group too. It doesn't much matter.
Okay, all right, Sherry, Sherry, I'm gonna go ahead and put you in Asia's group.
You're right. It was Cherie. Thank you. We've met before.
Kumar,
Yes,
it's Mary Beth. Could I be in Dominique's room,
yes, here we go.
please?
Okay, looks like we've got a couple other folks that are still waiting to be assigned. Ann Berkeley.
In any room that you choose.
Okay, all right, Ann, I'm gonna go ahead and put you with Nia and Maya. Here you go. Jill, can I go ahead and assign you a breakout room?
Yeah, that'd be super.
All right, you're also gonna go with Nia and Maya. Here you go. And Kim, can I assign you a breakout room? How about Mary?
Yes, that would be great.
Excellent. Here you go. I'm going to put you in Asia's room. And Mary Jo, where would you like to go? Mary Jo Crosby, are you there?
Hello, sorry. I thought I had clicked on Dominique, but I guess it didn't work. So
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and send you to Dominique's room. Here you go.
thank you.
Thanks, Kumar.
Yep. Now, the real question is, will people be able to get back? I'm going to stop recording because this is just recording the our room right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could.
Hello, everyone. I hope you all had wonderful discussions.
Asia,
and-
just a quick note that people are still filtering back in from the breakout room, so not everyone's back.
I will just go ahead and wait for everyone. If you could spotlight the panelists again, that'd be great, all 4 of us.
Absolutely. Once they're all back.
All right. So just some final thoughts. We have one last little slide to share, but I just want to give all of the panelists an opportunity to share some final thoughts. I wanted to say thank you. I had an absolutely amazing conversation with Sherry and Janet talking about a lot of different things. They're both had a lot of history and the personal connections to farming with their grandparents. So thank you both, and thank everyone that came to listen. Nia and Maya, did you have any last minute thoughts?
Asia, can
I
we,
was
sorry,
gonna-
can you just
Okay.
wait like 20 seconds? The last breakout room will
Yeah.
close and everyone will be back. Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
15 seconds.
Is everyone filtering back in?
Yes, should have everyone back.
Amazing.
You want to
Alrighty.
repeat what you said, or you can-
Yeah, I was just gonna state, I'd love for our panelists to just give last minute thoughts, and then we will put contact information up on the screen. So Maya, Nia, you can go ahead.
I was just gonna shout out Citizens Greener Evanston. They are pretty much our partners for the community garden that is taking place. So feel free, if you have the ability, the means, to donate Citizens Greener Evanston or Evanston Fight for Black Lives, and our Venmo can be in the chat. But thank you so much for having us, and thank you for all the great questions.
Dominique, would you like to add any last minute thoughts before we put contact info up and end the webinar?
Yeah, this has been a really great event. A lot of great conversations happening. You guys just keep up the energy. So, and drive it home.
I agree completely. All right, we can put contact info up, and I will go ahead and close this out for everyone. So you can email me, Maya, or Nia at the emails on screen. And then if you'd like to contact Dominique, you can contact her on LinkedIn. It's Dominique D. Edwards, MA. And then also please follow Evanston Fight for Black Lives on Instagram, join the Facebook group. And then if you have any questions regarding the community garden that they're trying to start up, go ahead and email them at Evanston Fight for Black Lives. And finally, I just want to thank absolutely everyone from the bottom of my heart for coming to this. It's something I'm very passionate about, it's something that our panelists are very passionate about. And I feel very thankful for everyone that came to this and had a wonderful, thoughtful conversation. And you can all leave. I want to respect your time. It's 7:31, so have a great night.
And then I just wanted to remind everyone, while everyone's typing in the contact information, that we do have an event coming up next week on the 25th. I'm going to put in the information in the chat.
Yes, please join that. It sounds absolutely amazing. I'll be there if you want to see my face again.
Yes, yes, please. It should be a wonderful event. Thank you so much to all our presenters.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank everybody.
Hey, B.